Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exclusive Boom Room interview. This is Sasha with Arcanum Ventures. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Carmelo. And today we are here with the two co-founders of Session App, Chris McCabe and Key Jefferys. Chris and Key, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on. How are you guys?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, feeling great. Thanks.
Awesome. I think this is a very exciting discussion because maybe a lot of our viewers are unfamiliar with what Session App might be, but I know you guys have been around for a long time. There's been a lot of tech that's been in development for a long time. But we're going to start this interview the same way we start every single Boom Room interview, in the most consistent and boring way possible. So if you don't mind, give us an overview. Who are Chris and Key? How did you guys meet? How did you get interested in the world of Web3, blockchain, and crypto? And how did you come to be here today launching Session App and a cryptocurrency behind Session App?
Yeah, so Chris, maybe you want to start?
I always start this one, so I was going to give you an opportunity. So, all right, it's too late. I'm rolling now. Hi, I'm Chris. So I've been in crypto since 2011. I was really passionate about Bitcoin back in the day. I had no one to talk to, but it was a secret passion of mine for many years. But yeah, it grew on me instead of the technology. I got really into privacy around 2017, and I sort of quit my job and just started learning software development. I went all in on crypto in 2017. And that's when I met Key Jefferys at sort of meetups, and we realized we had very similar values in terms of what this technology can do. And we actually were doing Monero talks in front of hundreds of people, and I was sort of like teaching people about crypto because there was so much noise. Even back then, there was so much noise, and it's only gotten noisier. So yeah, we sort of connected through passion. We were actually building Session and this like core underlying infrastructure and technology since 2018, and we hit the ground running. And the tech is available today. Like Session is available; it is working. We have over 1 million monthly active users, so it's a real technology that everyone can just download and put in their hands today. And yeah, we set out to build a like privacy full stack ecosystem, and we have relatively succeeded. Not many projects actually finished what they started, and I think we're one of the million or so who actually did the thing and delivered it to people and delivered on their promises. So I got so much more, but I'll let Key do his thing for a ramble.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Nice to be on the podcast. My background is more from a computer science perspective. So I was studying computer science at one of the local universities in 2016. And I think we were going through one of our networking and security classes. It was one of the units in the first year of this class. And I remember offhandedly the professor mentioning that Bitcoin was actually a very interesting application of cryptography, specifically like public-private key cryptography. And he said like, oh, you should look into it because it's like interesting and you can get involved in it and you can use it like today. So when he said that, I went and like started going down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin and reading the white paper and getting into the communities. And like Chris, like there wasn't too many people talking about Bitcoin in 2016, 17. So I started going to some local Bitcoin meetups in Melbourne. And that's where I met Chris in 2017. And from there, like we really got interested in cryptocurrency as a whole. But from my personal perspective, like the way that Bitcoin was originally sold was as this like privacy like coin. Like, yo, you could use this, like you'd be anonymous, like when you use this. And I think as I learned more about Bitcoin, I learned that it's actually not anonymous. Like it's actually less anonymous than perhaps some of the, normal systems that we use today, like cash or something like that. Every transaction is on a blockchain and recorded for all of history. And you can actually kind of map those pseudo-anonymous addresses to actual people. So when we found that out, I started to get way more interested in privacy coins like Monero. So we started to get into that space. We were doing some talks, as Chris was saying. And then I think we saw like a way where you could kind of combine a whole bunch of technologies which were coming up at the time or had been established. So you could combine an incentive model from a coin like Dash, which is a very old coin, but it had this idea of master nodes where you could run this network of nodes that would be incentivized, and they would actually do things for the users that use that network. You could then leverage like a privacy coin to do private transactions, and Monero was like innovating on that front. And then you could also build applications on top of this network as well. So we kind of, and those applications were kind of inspired by like Signal and Tor and like the other kind of privacy tools that were out there at that point. So it was kind of like this coming together of all of these different ideas of like, a private cryptocurrency and incentive system, and then also applications built on top of that system. And that's what we kind of originally started in 2018. And it's grown a long way since then. Like it's changed a lot as well from the original vision. But I think the core of like what we wanted to achieve in 2018, which was to have this massive network of decentralized nodes where you would have these applications that had lots of users and that were really user friendly. I think we've achieved that with Session. And as Chris said, you can go to the App Store and download it. It's a messaging application. It feels a lot like any other messaging application, but the properties provided by the network are so much more secure, so much more private because of that decentralized kind of groundwork that we laid in 2018.
That's awesome. I was under the impression that this was a messaging app that slowly pivoted and adopted decentralization and blockchain, but it sounds like this has been part of the plan from the beginning, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. We in our original white paper in 2018, we had this idea of a messenger. And I think originally we kind of thought of it more as a proof of concept. So wanted to build this entire network where developers could come along and build their own private applications on top of that network. And we thought, okay, what is like a good kind of proof of concept application? And we thought, a messaging app, like that's fairly easy to set up. And like once you can kind of pass messages around the network and pass data and store data on this decentralized network, you can generalize that to a lot of different things that you might want to do. So we built this initial like proof of concept version of the application. And the demand like from users was so high. People loved the messenger that we released at that point. I think at that point we realized, okay, maybe we need to kind of pivot away from being more of a developer platform where we're building the network and then like trying to attract devs to like building our own app on this network, which leverages every aspect. And that we have, because we built the network, obviously like we're kind of experts in how we can actually structure, and store data there. So we decided to kind of put more of our effort into building the Session application. And that's kind of what has happened over the last like 2 or 3 years. First couple of years we've spent building that decentralized network. Then we launched some POC apps, and then we kind of moved towards building those apps as the main thing that we did.
You made a really valid point before, Camelo, with so many Web3 projects. They have a technology and they're like, how do we make this Web3? But from our perspective, from the ground up, we're like, what can we do with decentralized technology? Like, what are the value propositions? And trustless decentralized networks, and then running like technology through that was like a no-brainer for us. And yeah, we just kept building and building to this point. So like without the token, the application can't operate. The 2,200 strong like deep-in network like needs the token for the incentive network like layer for them to sort of keep each other operating, keeping each other in check, which then relays all the communications, unroutes them, and stores them for up to 14 days as well. So without that infrastructure, Session is just another Web2 app. It's completely inseparable.
Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome example of discovering product market fit organically, and this sort of pivot and became your flagship product on your own chain. And that's exactly what we like to hear. Like you want to be unwavering in your core goals, which seems to be like privacy focused, but also not too hard headed to avoid pivots and listen to your community, which is, that's what you want to hear as an investor and somebody helping to build a company. And I wanted to ask because Sasha has used Session before and I have not. Deliberately, I wanted to talk to you guys first before trying it out. So I kind of wanted you guys to, like, for me and for our audience, explain, high level overview of what Session is doing and why it's different, and try to like sell me on why I should be using it, basically, because I'm excited about privacy, and I just want to hear more from you guys about what you're building and what it does.
You've come to the right place. I would just say super simple. And if you look at, say, Signal or WhatsApp versus Session, when you use Signal, you need a phone number. It all routes to a centralized server. Yes, it's open source, but they're all running on AWS servers around the world, controlled by Signal Foundation, which is great. But what we've been able to do is, because it's running through a decentralized network, we at no point in time are ever getting access to your communications. So if a centralized company can even get your metadata, your phone number, any of that kind of stuff, it can be used against the user very quickly and unfortunately. So when you use Session to public-private key, no phone number, no email, no metadata. When you send a message, it actually gets routed through 3 nodes. So even like one node can't really collect much data about you. The next, if you know about onion routing, the IP is stripped out, the metadata is stripped out, and then it's also stored by our own decentralized swarm network as well, which is part of that network. And they only hold your messages for 14 days, and they have no metadata about the sender or receiver. And then it gets onion routed again to the receiver. So metadata is absolutely stripped out. There's no requirement for a phone number, and you download Signal or WhatsApp and you ask for them to send you that 2FA code. Session's permissionless, so you just get it, go, start connecting globally, and there's nobody who can stop you from freedom and being who you want to be.
That was very convincing. I love what I hear so far. And just on that note, like, because I didn't know that about your app. So how do you maintain security? Like, if you can't have that 2FA option, like I personally love that. I would never use WhatsApp for professional purposes because I don't want to use my phone number. But what is the secondary option, or how do you log into this, and how do you make sure that nobody's hacking or hijacking it? Because we're seeing on Telegram right now, a lot of people are getting their Telegram handles stolen, and a lot of malicious activities happening because of that.
Yeah, it's actually pretty similar to generating a cryptocurrency wallet. So like when you use Bitcoin, you generate a wallet which gives you this public key, and then you also get a private key which you usually store as like a mnemonic phrase, like 12 words or 24 words. So Session is very similar. When you like start an account for the first time, or you download the Session app for the first time and create your account, it actually gives you a public key and then also like a list of 12 seed words which you can write down. And that's the method that you use to recover your account if your phone gets lost. And also like the security behind your account is literally the cryptographic key pair that's used to sign and also decrypt and encrypt every message that's sent on the network. This is like fairly abstracted away from a user though, because when most users are signing up to messaging applications, they don't want to have to like write a 12-word seed down. So what we do is like the onboarding flow for Sessions, like super easy. You just put in your display name, and then like you've got an account like instantly. Basically, you don't need to receive an SMS verification or anything like that. And then like as you start to use the account, we encourage you to back up your seed phrase so that if you lose your phone, that you're able to get access to your account again. But we don't like push that idea of like, oh, it's generating a cryptographic key right now, because that can be scary for a lot of users who are just coming in for the first time.
Yeah, we learned that the hard way. It seemed to be scary for like people who don't understand crypto at all were like, what the hell is this? I don't want to do this. And then people who really understood crypto and saw the value in private keys would also stop and be like, oh, I need to go home and write this down. And then they wouldn't have that experience on Session and start connecting with people. So we removed that, or it's still there, but it doesn't pop up until you make about 3 friends. And then it's like, hey, now Session has value to you. You should now write down that seed phrase. And it's definitely helped like bring people through the process much faster.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, nowadays we refer to this as account abstraction, but I mean, we're just talking about good UI UX. And it's funny, going back to what you guys had previously mentioned about starting this from a cryptocurrency or cryptographic use case. When I first downloaded and used the Session app, it was recommended to me by a friend of mine, and I think we initially connected because we made a review video, a 10-minute eye test on Session, and I was talking in that video about a friend of mine who you might consider to be a prepper, like a doomsday prepper, kind of crazy, like privacy focused guy. And he told me about this app, and I downloaded it. I logged in, and I realized very quickly, like, this is a very bare bones, privacy focused messenger. And at no point did I feel like there were any sort of blockchain infrastructure powering this. And the only thing that gave me a hint was that my username was a string of characters, and they were just numbers and letters. And so I thought maybe there's something here. But again, it was an incredible masterclass, and like, this is meant for everybody. Anybody could download it and use it. And it's really interesting that you guys kind of naturally evolved down that road. I do want to dive in much deeper on the tech and how some things work, but I've been dying to ask a lot around your own journey when it comes to this company vision and the focus on privacy. And I know Carmelo and I meet a lot of companies that are building privacy-focused infrastructure, and in many cases, people question why they want to do that because there seems to be, not a lot of emphasis from an everyday consumer on privacy. And we've seen that happen more and more. People are so willing to give up privacy, data, everything when it means a little bit of convenience. Let's say logging in on SSO or logging in with their Facebook account or whatever into any sort of application. And so when we see founders that are building privacy tech, it's usually because they have a very strong vision, or there's some sort of story that's central to like the core driver for them. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit. Like, why are you guys so focused on privacy, and what took you down this road?
I think for me, it's more abstract rather like I don't have a personal experience that I can share with you that's like, oh, this is the thing, like when people say that they became a doctor because, they were in hospital for a long time and the doctor helped them out or something like that. So I don't have that personal experience. I mean, there were a lot of data breaches in Australia for like Medibank and Optus and like all of these different companies which served a large amount of Australian users. I think I was caught up in some of those. But for me, I think it's more abstract in terms of I think you need privacy to have freedom of speech. If people don't have these spaces where they can feel that they can communicate with their friends without someone watching over their back, the like scope of ideas which they can actually explore with each other is minimized. It's like if you imagine like a scenario where you're in a room and there's like 10 surveillance cameras pointed at you, are you really going to be able to share like your exact political view or like your exact view on this controversial topic? Probably not. And like think about all of the things that you've probably said over the last like 10 years or when you're a teenager as well, that if there was like a kind of a chat logs that people could view, you would have said some crazy stuff that you don't believe anymore. But it's through talking to people and feeling like we're in a safe space with friends that we actually discover whether our ideas are good or bad. And I think that's what Session provides. It provides this space where people can feel that they're not being watched over their backs. And actually, from that perspective, I think it opens up the range of ideas that people can talk about without feeling like they're being monitored, and develops like the world in terms of like, giving people places to discuss their ideas. So that's perhaps abstract, but that's where I think my vision comes from.
From my side, I get this really yucky feeling when I'm using Web2 tech, and every time I'm using literally anything like WhatsApp or something, I just feel kind of gross, and I'm like, what else is happening with my data? When I'm using Chrome, sometimes like, I think, what are you doing with like how I'm clicking? What time of the day it is? Like, where is this data going? Like, I kind of overthink these things way too deep, and whenever I'm using any other application that's running through a centralized server, I'm just my paranoid mind just really wants me to get away from it and have this like yucky feeling. And my like sense of freedom with Session is kind of like the concept of crypto, where even with banks, like the more you dig into how a bank operates in this global world, it just gets yuckier and yuckier. And with Bitcoin and crypto, what attracts people is that freedom, the freedom from the yuckiness and the freedom to store your own assets, not have to worry if that bank's going to disappear. And with Session, it's a really similar feeling of, like only I have access to this, me and the person I'm talking to. It doesn't exist forever. It's not going to sit on Facebook server and then be sold later and used against me in whatever way that they want to in the future. And it just gives me like peace of mind. And it's kind of what drives me towards Session. And when I use anything else, I really think about what I'm saying. I'm like, oh, what if like, I don't know, this leaks or whatever. Not that I'm everything I say is above board. I'm a very professional individual, but it's just that it just gets rid of that feeling of concern, and it just gives you that just freedom as an individual.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree, and I hate like one of the counter arguments that, oh, if you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't worry about your data being shared. But I saw this thing actually yesterday about back in 2011, Angry Birds, they scraped IMEI addresses from every user for an anti-cheating mechanism. So while it might have had a good intention, I mean, cheating in Angry Birds is kind of a silly use case for it, but this eventually was a source of like a major leak, and then surveillance protocols from governments around the world were able to use this and tap into this and use something from Angry Birds to monitor and surveil, which is kind of terrifying. And I wanted to ask, like, why do you think it's so hard to get people to care about this? Because Sasha and I, we scream it from the mountaintops all the time. Like, why are you giving all your data away so freely, and why are you so comfortable with this? Like you said, I also get that yucky feeling from Web 2. I'm like, I can't believe everybody is willing to connect Facebook to everything, for example. So how do we get people to like take this more seriously and care about it? Because it seems like people like convenience over privacy.
I think I probably have a more pessimistic, like doomer attitude to this, which is maybe things need to get worse before they get better. Maybe we need some accelerationism here, like in terms of, I think we're starting to see the data breaches like really add up. Like every year in Australia, there's another data breach, like from a major company, which is revealing like passport information, bank information, like medical information. And maybe it's just like you reach some sort of critical mass on that front where people start getting their like personal identities stolen like en masse, and that really affects them financially. I think it might need to kind of get to that point before people really wake up and realize that, you know, the apps that they're using every day don't need this data, and that, you know, requesting it and storing it on these servers creates this massive vulnerability for future compromise. But yeah, it's just really hard to get people over the whole convenience, like privacy thing. I mean, the other answer to that is like just build a better app so that people aren't really trading off their convenience for privacy. They're getting both. They just don't know, like they don't need to know about all of the decentralized stuff that's going on in the background. They just need to have all of the features that they have in a centralized messaging application, and for that to feel just as good as a centralized application. And then they will choose the options which actually provide more privacy to them. Like a lot of the reason that Telegram has gotten so big is because they've been able to spin this narrative that like Durov is on your side, and like, you know, he fled Russia to like save the Ukrainian like Facebook messages, or the Russian version of Facebook VK. A lot of that is like the narrative around Telegram, that it's private and it gives you freedom. But the actual way that it's technically built, it is not, you know, providing any privacy or security. The messages are literally unencrypted and stored on Telegram's servers in most cases. So like people will choose things that are more private and secure, or things that they think are more private and secure, as long as you provide the features there as well. So yeah, maybe just like don't kind of make them not have to make the trade-off essentially.
I would say there's a shifting value proposition in society as well. I do think that a lot of people are waking up to privacy with each data breach, and it's quite clear that no centralized company can safely hold your data. The amount of government breaches of people's, like if your government cannot hold it safe, nobody can. And the honeypot value of a foreign government organization trying to get that data, they have infinite money. They're going to get the data. You can't stop them. They will get that data. So you can't, there's no one you can really trust with your data. And the more it's worth, the higher the probability or the sooner it will be taken, because inevitably it's probably all going to be taken. But the higher the value, the sooner it's probably going to be taken. So it does seem that like younger generations are also waking up to privacy. They kind of get trapped. They kind of get fooled a couple of times, and then I would say they're the most aware of what's going on with their data. And maybe they say something, and then they start getting targeted advertisements. And it seems like they're probably waking up the fastest, and the older generation are just sort of following along. You know, if their kids are on it, maybe they got on it too. Funnily enough, we do have a lot of like older people using Session, which has been interesting for like professional things, for medical reasons. So there is different markets that work for Session, but I think there's a value proposition shift that's happening in society a little bit slowly, but we do see fast shifts as well. For instance, Iran, a couple of years ago, there was massive government protests. They blocked Telegram, Signal, and WhatsApp. They blocked people, I think, using it and also signing up. So when you did that phone number 2FA thing, they were just like, nope, you're not going to get that message. You're not going to be able to talk to anybody. And we saw a boom in growth because people needed something that would bypass that restriction. Like people needed to talk. And yeah, we saw over 500,000 people in a week download Session and start using it. And then that like blew up in terms of like global awareness for what Session could do that others could not.
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, we want to dive into the sort of government aspect too, and what you're allowed to do and the regulation behind it. But just real quick, I know Sasha has a question, but I wanted to ask like what you guys think your core demographic is. Like, what percentage of your users are crypto friendly? Because obviously, crypto people are more likely to care about privacy, but regular, everyday, non-crypto people, like you said, you have to abstract this crypto stuff away so that you can attract more people, but they might not be. This might not be so important to them, or they might not know about these things as much. So like how much what's the split there of like non-crypto people to crypto people, do you think, and how do you like continue to attract more non-crypto people as well as you scale?
I would say fundamentally we attract more non-crypto people than crypto people.
Oh,
And when I go to a crypto conference wearing a session t-shirt, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, it's not a crypto project. There's
yeah,
the amount of times people have said that who are very into crypto just have no idea. And then they click, oh, yeah, the seed phrase. Oh, is it? And then you explain it's decentralized and it kind of blows their mind, even though they've been using it for 6 months or so. So our focus really hasn't been on Web3 market. And there's been because I would say the crypto market does these 4-year cycles when if you connect yourself too much to crypto and you're a long-term project, the market sentiment sort of shifts against you and for you depending on the market. So we haven't
yeah,
really been focusing on Web3 market as our user base, more just, most secure messaging application that you can get. And then as we continue and the application gets to the point of relative perfection is when we start bringing more of the crypto stuff and sort of slowly introducing that and then really expanding on what we can do with that tech. But most of our users are US-based users and then Western European, and they're really scattered. There's thousands and there's people everywhere. But yeah, US is a current key demographic. But couldn't split how many are Web 2 or Web 3. I just know that the Web 3
yeah.
people have no idea.
No, I mean that's a fair assessment. That makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I imagine you might get a lot more American users in the coming months and years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Privacy becomes a
definitely.
bigger
yeah,
I mean,
focus.
with
most
all the
likely.
stuff that's going on in Signal as well, like with the whole Signal
Yeah,
stuff that's happened
yeah,
recently.
yeah. That probably gave you a nice little boost as well. The Telegram news last year, and then the Signal news in the last few months. So a lot going on in the private messaging app world.
Yeah, I was
Definitely.
gonna say I really love what you guys are doing and what you're building, and of course, like the messaging is very optimistic. It's a shame that people don't put this much emphasis on data privacy anymore, and it seems like that void is just growing. And I know that I mean I say this to people all the time. It's really weird how we have all these private companies that are collecting people's very private and personal data. It's like you're giving your entire story to a company so that they can sell you bubblegum better. It's really weird that like advertisement is the end goal. And this is why we're like just giving away our entire lives and data because data is so valuable and demonstrably monetizable. But just, in addition to the uphill battle that you guys have in your way for like trying to evangelize privacy, trying to speak with people and say, hey, look, this can solve some serious problems, and you guys like seeing upticks during certain events is great, but it's a shame that those upticks come from dire circumstances in a lot of those cases, right? And on top of that, there seems to be a very anti-government sentiment or anti-privacy sentiment from governments. And you guys mentioned Pavel Durov with Telegram, and we all know what happened last year with him in Paris. And so I read an article recently that I wanted to kind of get your guys' input on. I know that in addition to these, like the public sentiment around privacy and like the dying interest in privacy, which is quite difficult to deal with, that you guys have also, run into some issues with government and I believe the police in Australia. I read an article that was published in The Guardian saying that you guys were the subject of harassment several times by Australian police. And simply, I mean, I don't think the reasoning was made clear, but if I had to guess, it's because you guys are operating what seems to be a fully decentralized, non-centrally controlled messaging application where data is not shared and metadata is not distributed. So, if you don't mind, maybe giving us a little bit of information on like what happened there, and do you anticipate this kind of unfolding into something bigger as Session gains more users that are privacy focused?
Yeah, I think like with governments, they have certain assumptions about how messaging applications are run. And Session being, a fully decentralized application, whereas Chris said we don't have the data that users are sending. They literally don't touch our servers at all. They're using that network of 2,200 nodes. But I think there's that assumption that, if a new messaging app comes up, the government wants to know, how it's being run. Like, are there any points where we can get data? Like, can you give us user data about this user? So they're like, all those questions will always come from governments, and I think those are some of the same questions that we received as well. It's like, where are the central points of control here? And the answer is always like, there aren't central points of control. It's a decentralized network with 2,200 nodes. Like, if you want to get data, even though like there's no metadata, you'd be getting encrypted blobs. You have to go to the network of 2,200 nodes. Those are the individuals that are running the network and relaying things. But I think because they make that assumption that everything's run in a centralized way, and they don't really fully understand how Web3 tech works, that they make that assumption and they go to the developers of the application or one of the main development teams that's working on the application and say, oh, we want this, we want this, we want this. So we've always tried to have like a non-adversarial relationship. Like, we don't hate police or anything. That's not like where we're at. Like, there are limitations that are technical in nature because we don't have the data, and we've just tried to communicate that clearly. I think the regulatory landscape in Australia has changed pretty dramatically since we started, and that was part of the decision for why we moved the foundation, which is the steward of the Session project, to Switzerland. So that's being operated in Switzerland now. We have a good guy up there, Alex, which is the president. He's the president of the foundation. So they're the one that handles all of the releases and the publishing on the app stores. So that's given us a bit more clarity in terms of like our regulatory footing. But yeah, it's a constantly like evolving scenario. And even like recently, Switzerland announced these like new laws that are going to, they've proposed these new laws that would be like kind of wanting to insert backdoors into certain technologies. So I think it's like the case that nowhere is safe. The only thing that you can do is build technical systems that aren't able to be compromised. And I think that's what we've done at Session.
Yeah, and I think that with many crypto projects or decentralized technology projects, they start very centralized and then they become more and more decentralized. But you can't really do that with what we've done, because if we did that, then we probably would have been limited and like forced to not decentralize. So the people who want the data could probably force companies to give us the data. But fundamentally, from the get-go, we've never had the data. We've never been able to access it. And that's sort of this beauty in the technology that we built that is fundamentally different to all the other messaging apps that are out there today. It's just here, there is no data.
It's wild because, like I said, someone was going to build this, and you guys have built it, right? If we've got the limitations of technology, we've got cryptography, and we've got distributed or decentralized systems. Session was going to happen, right? And now it's kind of like the ball is in the government or regulators' turf in figuring out how to regulate this or work around it. And one of the let's say classic arguments that many governments might make if they have a big lapse in like visibility in people's data or like communications in a particular app is understanding like how it can be used for facilitating certain criminal activity or questionable behavior, like if it's against a certain political system. And in many cases, I imagine governments may actually sort of provoke that into happening. And so have you guys given much thought into maybe how you might protect yourself or the protocol, or even deal with a certain situation where Session might be used for criminal activity, or you might have, let's say, like agent provocateurs that are trying to create a justification to shut Session down by performing questionable behavior and then going back to the government saying, hey, look, this is happening on the application?
Yeah, I think that the main thing like to cover there is like if both Chris and I, disappear and the whole Session development team disappears, you were held at gunpoint or something like that, the Session app continues to function. There is no like kind of central points. It's the decentralized network which runs everything. everything else can be swapped out. The protocol can be forked away if we're forced to push some sort of package. Everything's open source as well, so anything that goes out can be verified by other users, and there are always users that are looking at the session source code and verifying that it actually does what it says it does. So I think you can't really limit like government's ability to use tools in a malicious way to like create this narrative that, you know, this tool is being used in a bad way. That's always going to be a possibility. But what you can do is you can remove your ability to control where the session exists into the future. I think that's what we've done well at Session, is like, if we all disappear, Session continues to run, it continues to operate, people can still send messages. So we've, in this, like in that same sense, we've kind of removed the incentive as well, because, you know, if you create this like big scenario that goes on and you say like Session is really bad, we need to shut it down. Well, you actually can't shut Session down unless you go to each individual node that's in every single jurisdiction and say you have to stop running Session. So it removes the incentive to actually like, you know, create these like false scenarios as well, by decentralizing the network.
Wow, that's huge.
On that note, like just real quick, what are the plans to like scale that network? Because obviously the more nodes you have, the more secure it is and the more tamper proof it is. So do you have a plan to like bring on thousands of new nodes?
Yeah, so like part of the Session migration is like, you know, migrating to a new token. So we've been operating on this, you know, essentially a fork of Monero for the last like 6 or 7 years. We've decided to like move to Arbitrum, which is a much more connected ecosystem. You've got that Ethereum, like direct connection to Ethereum. It also just makes the token much easier to get involved in, because it's quite the user experience hurdle of like buying a Monero based coin and like syncing up the chain and like finding an exchange that actually supports a private cryptocurrency is like very difficult. So like by moving the token to be on Arbitrum, it's going to give people a lot easier access to get their hands on the token. And we've also like completely redone the entire like staking front end. So it's a web-based portal now. You don't need to like download a software and like, you know, do CLI commands. You can just go to a website, connect your MetaMask, and start staking from that perspective. So the barriers are really being reduced to getting involved in the Session network. And we think that that's really going to get a lot more people involved in running nodes, which is always good. The more people running nodes, the better, especially like people putting nodes in like different jurisdictions. So like, you know, I probably don't have a node in like Antarctica or something, but it would be good to have one. You know, if someone has a good internet connection down there, so that we're routing through there. So it's always good to get more operators on from that perspective.
I think a key concept of what we've done with Session is create like a new model of communication, just like torrenting, like uTorrent or whatever. This open source technology that, you know, if you shut down uTorrent, 10 more pop up, and it becomes like the more attention it gets, the more like growth and infection it gets as like a technology. So even with or without us, we've created a concept, a proof of concept with, you know, over 1 million users, and it's like planted a seed of technology. And if it ever goes down, all that open source technology is available. You can just boot everything up and you can just continue the mission. It's sort of an unstoppable free technology that everyone can get into if it's ever reduced. Like if we can't continue this mission, I really hope that it just never stops and just gets stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I love that. I vibe with that. And that, you know, after like the cryptography wars, like decades ago in like the 70s and 80s, and they determined that like code is speech, you know, and after what happened with Tornado Cash, you know, people were using this to clean money, and obviously criminals can access this and use this, but it's a tool like anything else. Like to commit a crime, you need to use a car or a road. So these things are not. It's hard to say you can't use these because you could potentially use this to commit crime. So I wanted to ask, like, aside from the government aspect, because it's a whole different can of worms. Ethically, as company founders and foundation founders, like how do you fix that internally? How do you reasonably limit this bad activity happening on there? Like you obviously don't have any central point of control. You don't have access to this data. So you can't even actually prove what people are using this network for. But how do you kind of limit that? Because one of the fundamental struggles in free speech and blockchain and sometimes like Web3 social media is how do we let people have censorship resistant free speech, but also mitigate any instances where we have to kind of stop it from happening because there's obviously some instances where we have to limit speech. How do you guys kind of like do that? Because you're using decentralization as a shield essentially from regulation, which is smart, but there's some things that are out of your control, and it might just be as simple as we don't have control over this. We just created this infrastructure for anybody to use.
I got a couple here. Let me kick this off, and then you continue this one. So with every feature that gets built in session, there's a consideration: how's this going to be used? How do we make sure we're building in the right direction, not the wrong direction? So there's a lot of small things that affect how people use the application. So sending files is relatively limited. It's only 10 megabytes for videos and pictures and that kind of stuff and files. So putting, say, a paywall to go above that really reduces certain negative activity. And that's what we're looking to do with premium features in session in the future. Things that maybe people would take in a bad direction, you have to put like a payment up and something that you can lose as well. So when you have features like that and you put that limitation on there and ability to pull back, that sort of like enables more features that could get used well or not well, and allowing you to limit that sort of negative growth. And with every feature that we build, with every feature that gets built, we do think about, is this the right feature for now? If we focus on this now, where's it going to take the community? And are we building for the right community? Are we building for people who just want private communications, freedom, focusing on journalism, like whistleblowing, and letting people have a voice in countries where people aren't allowed to talk is a really valuable, I would say noble outcome that we focus on. But yeah, that's my sort of 2 cents on the matter.
Yeah, I think like just going off that, like another example of one of the features that we've put into session is you kind of require this explicit approval from other people to receive messages from them. So we have what's called a message request system. So when someone sends you a message, it goes into this different folder, and then you actually have to approve that user to be able to continue sending messages to them. So that really cuts down on spam, for example, which is obviously a misuse of the application. Like there are other things as well, like, in terms of we don't have like massive discoverability as well. So like if there's some bad community that sets up, that's actually something that you have to be explicitly invited to and like provide your consent to join and start seeing those things. It's not something that you can just kind of search in the application where, some user can come along and just be searching up bad content and then find groups that, are going to be propagating that bad content. So it's about like kind of consent and approval of those things to kind of cut down on misuse. From my perspective, like just ethically, we don't get to see like session user data. Like the messages don't flow across our servers, so you're right, we can't see exactly what people are using session for. But through like building session, I've talked to so many different session users over the last 5 years, and overwhelmingly, like what I've heard from session users is like, I'm just using this to send like messages to my friends and family because I don't want like the government spying on what I'm saying. And for me, that's like, that ethically puts me in a frame of mind where like I'm taking a utilitarian approach to this. Like, there's maybe like, 0.0001% of users that are using session, for malicious purposes. The other 99.999% of users are using it just to send messages from their friends and family. So if you look at that from a utilitarian perspective, like the positives much outweigh the negatives for me. And that that absolves like a lot of the maybe like hand wringing you would have if you were thinking about, this technology has potential for misuse. The other thing is like, as you said, roads and cash, like, people don't kind of morally wring their hands about, I'm using cash to pay the cashier, and cash can also be used to buy drugs or like finance, like, malicious activities overseas. We don't typically think of that. And that's usually because we're thinking about it from a utilitarian perspective. Like 99.99% of the cash payments that are made in the world are not being used for malicious purposes. They're just being used to, pay the grocery bill or like, go down to the shops and spend some money on some shoes or something like that. So I think like if we compare this to other technologies, like it's it doesn't, the argument kind of doesn't hold weight that's put up against like, these technologies.
I got one more cent to throw in that piggy bank. The people who build session really care about it as well. As a company, as a tech company, it's full of a lot of people with big hearts who really see the fundamental issues with society and big tech. And that's what drives them to build those features and build that technology. And it is a fundamental sort of philosophical question. It's like, am I doing good or am I doing bad? And every
Yeah.
day, the people who build Session, they're good people building good things. And that's like the best thing that we can do with the technology.
Yeah, I mean, people just want to share memes with their friends. Most people are just using it for very regular use cases. But I wanted to ask you too. Like, I've had this on my mind for a while, and something that Sasha and I struggle with, like Arcanum Ventures. You guys asked us before we started filming, like what we do, and we invest and back and help build companies, and we also like wear our hearts on our sleeves. We want to make money, obviously, make a living, but we also want to make the world a better place. So our business model necessitates that we make as much money as possible. But honestly, we want to invest in companies that are doing good, and Session seems to be doing that. So I wanted to ask you about your business model and how you make money, because you're obviously sacrificing a lot by not being a company that sells data. So I always tell people like Amazon is not an e-com business; it's a data warehouse. They don't make any money actually on their sales of random Chinese objects on their website. They make all their money on selling data. So how do you guys justify? I mean, you have an open source protocol, and you have a business, you have a business model. You want to make money so you can pay your bills and be people in the world. We need jobs. But how do you sort of get investors on board with this idea when you're not trying to extract every last dollar out of everything you do, and you're doing this kind of altruistically?
It's a good point. It's a bit of a challenge. So we've been building from day dot to just bring as many people onto the platform as we can. Our next, like the next focus of Session is more sort of premium, pro, and subscription models that are really valuable to power users and the people who are using Session a lot. From there, the intention is to have sort of a monthly fee, goes into the protocol. We also sort of, as a foundation, operate, say, 10% of the nodes. So that's the foundation's income as well. And yeah, to date, like we haven't implemented all the premium features and concepts that we'd like to put into Session, but that's sort of the long-term sustainability path of the technology and ecosystem and the project. And do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, just to give a bit more color on that, like the way that we've always thought about like how Session can, continue to pay developers moving forward is through a freemium model. So most users are going to use the application for free, and they're going to get most of the features that an average user would use day to day. But then you have this like kind of subsect of like power users. Those are the users that are sending 1,000 messages a day, and like they're using this every day as a tool. They're also might be sending like large files that they want to send to other people. They want to have more features to be able to organize their chat experience as well. So like folders and more pinned messages and larger groups and increased communities and stuff like that. So it's really about we don't want to kill the growth of Session by just putting in like, oh, you have to pay like to be able to use the application, or everyone has to pay a subscription fee. We want to take the power users and offer them additional features which they're really going to love, and use that to subsidize like essentially the cost of the free users and also like the cost of the protocol, because you can't just keep emitting coins forever and paying out nodes. There needs to be some sort of incoming source of actual like fiat value that's coming in and being put into the token ecosystem. So that's like always been the idea, and I think like in the next kind of 6 to 12 months, that's when we'll really start focusing on premium features for those users and actually converting those users into paying users. And I think, like, although like I've kind of talked shit about Telegram, I think Telegram has actually done a really good job with premium. There's a lot of subscribers to premium. It offers a lot of cool features, increased file uploads, the chat organization features that I was talking about, like badges as well, which give you a bit of skin in the game when you join a new chat, so that you can say, okay, this user's probably not a spammer because they paid for premium. Those are the type of things that we're looking to introduce into Session as an option for those premium users. And I think Telegram has shown how that can be a really successful business model moving forward.
Yeah, I mean they waited forever, just like YouTube waited like 8 years, I think, before they monetized. And Telegram did, to their credit, they're not greedy. At least like everybody's been using it for free so far, for the most part.
Yeah, I think their business model is a bit interesting though, where there are features you can only access through gaining certain types of in-app points for gifting premium to other people. So it can be limiting if you're a specific kind of power user. But the cool thing about you guys following up is understanding like where these tried and true business models do well and where they sort of like, fall flat a little bit. And so you guys can improve on this system, especially considering a lot of people that use Telegram are very likely to be interested in using Session. But overall, I think what you guys are doing is quite incredible. I've been trying to wrap my head around the impact of it, and just like Chris, just like you mentioned before, if you guys go away, like there's going to be another one. You guys may have changed the world with developing Session and having this decentralized network of validators that are pushing this app forward, regardless of who's at the helm. So it's very impactful, and I'm really excited to see what happens. And you did mention at one point that there are some limitations around multimedia messaging. I know if we're talking about on-chain storage, it's very expensive or slow or both. And so I'm curious, with that in mind, but also what else you guys have going on. What does the future of Session look like in the next 1, 3, and 5 years?
Yeah, so like in terms of on-chain storage, Session doesn't actually store anything on the blockchain apart from like the registrations of nodes and the rewards that are being sent out to different nodes. All of the data in Session is actually stored in the individual nodes, but not shared across an entire blockchain. We kind of always wanted to move away from like storing things on the blockchain because of the expensiveness of like replicating across 2200 nodes, and then also like the privacy aspects as well. If you store on a blockchain, typically it's going to be stored forever, which means that you can always go backwards and get message logs that are years and years old. So like the system that was designed in Session is this kind of limited replication system called swarms. And that's a group of 5 to 7 nodes, and every user in Session has a swarm. And when you send a message to someone on Session, it goes to their swarm. It's replicated 5 to 7 times. And if one of those nodes goes offline, you still have a copy on another one of those 7 nodes that's in the swarm. So that like solves for actually like one of the biggest issues in decentralized messaging before this point was that you couldn't actually send a message to someone who was offline. You both needed to be online at the same time because you had no storage mechanism. And Session like really solves that problem in an elegant way and a secure way. So that's from the message storage side. From an attachment side, like messages are really small. Obviously, it's like you're talking about kilobytes of data if it's just a text message. When you're talking about larger attachments, there is a need to kind of reduce the replication that's going on there. Otherwise, you would be having these nodes store hundreds of gigabytes of data. So there's essentially like we run our own file server, which has basically, it's just encrypted blobs. So you end-to-end encrypt your attachment before you upload it to Session. That is then stored on the server, and then you basically give someone a link with the encryption key and a link to that server, and then you onion request from that server as well, so you don't expose your IP address. So the server in the network is really just storing encrypted blobs. It doesn't see anything about them. The sender, the receiver, the IP address, the phone number, all of that's removed. And then people can also set up their own file servers as well. All of that code's open source. So if you don't want to use the file server that we're running, you can set up your own, you can store your files there, and people will be able to send and receive media attachments just fine. In terms of like the future of what is happening, we've had an issue in Session where we weren't able to send really large files. And that's based on the onion routing network that we use in Session. So that whole layer is being redone at the moment, which is going to allow us to send and receive like much larger files, and then also to be able to send those files and receive those files faster as well. So that's one of the big things that I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'll give you a sexy summary of the future. So right now, usability is key, growth is key. We're going to be implementing the new onion routing tech in the future that will make Session much faster, hopefully about a 10x in terms of speed and sort of the amount of features that we can bring into Session as well is quite substantial. That should be launched in the next 2 to 3 months and implemented into Session. We're doing a transition of our infrastructure away from the Monero fork to Session token, which is going to be an Arbitrum, which is super exciting. That should be in the next couple of weeks or month. So that's massive, big change. And once we implement LokiNet or like the new onion router technology, it will allow larger file transfers. Really keen to bring in premium and make the whole ecosystem more sustainable. And I think that once you have a proof of concept of sustainability in a decentralized network, it attracts more people as well. It's like, oh, this is very sustainable and viable as a technology. And I'm excited to like wake the world up to what we can do in that side as well. And just making sessions sexier and more fun to use with each new sort of UX UI improvement that we bring in, and making it more customizable, and something that's so simple that you can get your grandparents onto and just have a nice private discussion.
The grandparents test, the infamous grandparents test. I think we got to wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask you real quick. Well, two more questions, but one, where can people find out more information about the token migration, the nodes, where they can operate nodes? We're going to drop the links in the show notes below, so people will be able to find that. But do you have any more information or dates on when these things are going to happen?
Yeah, we've started the entire migration process, so it has to happen through like 3 separate network upgrades. So we've done the first one, and the second one is going to be happening this week, and then there'll be the TG, which happens very soon. So I can't give an exact date on that, but it's going to be very soon. If you want to find out more, getsession.org is the best place to go, or if you just Google session, it's the first thing that pops up. We're also on Twitter, so if you search session on Twitter, you'll find us, the green session logo, the same one that's in the background there. And it's always good to have new contributors as well. So if you're a programmer, all of our code is open source, so you can go on GitHub, you can start looking at the applications, you can submit your own code. Just don't submit any backdoors.
We'll find you. We'll get you.
We'll kind of merge that in if it's good and adds new features that are cool. So always new ways to get involved from a community perspective.
Amazing. That's all exciting, and we're gonna have to have you guys back on because we can talk about this for hours, frankly. And we love these conversations. I mean, unfortunately, we have to cut it short, but we're definitely gonna have to have more to discuss, especially as you guys build more apps and the next several months after the launch of the token and everything. But we usually wrap up every interview with what are you guys most bullish on in the next 6 to 12 months? And obviously you can't choose session or session token because that's obvious. Yeah, I know. It's limiting. But yeah, it can be anything in privacy tech, but maybe better to give something out of privacy tech just to give a more well-rounded view of what you guys are looking forward to. So if you want to just share that before we wrap it up.
Meme coins.
I opt out of meme coins and NFTs. I can't do them. They hurt my soul. But good on the people who are doing them. Have fun. Doge. Maybe Doge. Doge should be good. I'm very bullish in the next 6 months. For the last 2 or 3 months, when the tariffs are kicking in, everyone's like, it's over. I'm like, just chill. Chill. It is going to bounce so hard. Just relax. And it's kind of nice to see that happening now with Ethereum, Bitcoin popping off. So one thing I'm looking forward to is actually like DeFi projects, like DeFi Summer. I'm a really big fan of decentralized exchanges. I think that there's a big issue in terms of how people onboard into crypto, where you have to give all your information across to a centralized exchange, and then that's held, and that's probably going to be stolen or lost as well. So I'm really excited about the concept of like truly like low cost decentralized exchange. And I will shill a project that I'm relatively involved in as well called Chainflip. Really sick project, and I think
nice.
Projects like that I think are going to go. Like I just think it has such a huge value proposition to the ecosystem, like the crypto ecosystem.
Great shout.
I might take it a bit left field and go outside of blockchain. I've been quite interested recently in robotics and also like kind of the crossover between like kind of humanoid robotics and also like household task robotics as well. I think if we can build a robot which can do your dishes and do your cleaning and like clean up your house and like do all of these things that you probably spend half an hour or an hour on every day. I think this is going to be huge for just like productivity. It's going to free up a lot of people's time, and I think we're not actually that far from developing that technology. I've seen some really exciting stuff on Twitter recently with not humanoid robotics, but just kind of intelligently designed robots that can do
Oh, yeah.
tasks around the house. So
Roomba.
yeah, that's my left of field thing.
So you're bullish on more microphones and cameras.
That's a first.
Yes, yeah.
IoT devices.
I want
all
the
kinds.
AI to be holding a knife.
Oh man, this took a weird
That's how you
turn.
drive the fear.
Yeah.
It comes back.
Oh man. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having both of you on, Chris and Keith. Thanks so much for taking the time. We've got to get you guys on again because we've got an entire other list of questions that we want to dive deep into. But it's been so great learning about Session, learning about your journey individually and together. And again, for all of our viewers, make sure you check out the show notes. We're going to drop some links to Session app and what these guys are doing, maybe their personal Twitter handles if you want to tell them how cool you think privacy is. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. We've got some more fun interviews coming out and some more investor eye tests and many more things. And guys, again, absolute pleasure. Looking forward to speaking with you again. Best of luck on the upcoming launch. And yeah, take care.
All the best
Yeah,
to
thank
you.
you,
Thanks
lads.
for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.